It's always a smart policy to take anything that politicians say in an election campaign with a grain of salt and a heavy dose of scepticism. But this is particularly so when politicians start making motherhood statements about housing affordability, about how much they care about it and what they'll do about it. Now, housing affordability has been a hot political issue for decades, but with each passing year it gets notably worse, despite all the promises made by a long line of politicians across all the states and territories. Now, the latest rhetoric on this subject has come from the opposition leader in New South Wales as that state approaches a state election. Chris Minns says that he'll fix the affordability problem in New South Wales, notably Sydney, which is the most unaffordable city in the nation with a median dwelling price above $1 million. He's rolled out the usual platitudes about providing assistance to first-home buyers, including reducing stamp duty for first-timers, but none of the suggested measures address the real issues, and we can be sure that housing affordability won't improve in Sydney or regional New South Wales if Chris Minns becomes Premier after the election in March. There's a long and sorry history for politicians of all colours when it comes to this issue. When Gladys Berejiklian became New South Wales Premier in 2017, her victory speech was devoted in large part to promises about fixing the housing affordability problem in the state. But every decision relating to the housing market issues made by her government over the next 4 years actually made affordability worse. And that speaks to the reality that poor housing affordability in Australia is a direct consequence of decisions by politicians at all levels of government in Australia. The key issue is taxation in all its forms. All three levels of government in Australia treat the housing industry as their favourite cash cow. It's the go-to place whenever politicians feel the need to raise some money to pay for their pet policies. Politicians tend to slam property developers and builders with new taxes and fees and charges and levies because they see them as rich, greedy minority, and therefore slugging them doesn't hurt the politicians in the electorate. But every new cost dumped on builders and developers adds to the cost of creating new house and land packages, and it's first-home buyers ultimately who pay for the new taxes. Politicians also see housing as a hot button issue for consumers, and they're constantly tinkering with laws and rules that apply to housing, including matters that impact the design of houses and apartments, which invariably adds to the costs. And this is why affordability gets progressively worse in Australia year after year. The people who say they'll fix the problem are the same people who have caused the problems. Politicians who continually add to the cost of housing by changing the rules or adding new taxes on the industry. The reality is that all the key problems afflicting the housing market right now, affordability, the rental shortage and builders going broke, have been caused by the decisions and actions of our politicians. Repeated policy decisions and taxation measures by politicians have made affordability progressively worse. A string of actions by politicians and bureaucrats have created the rental shortage crisis, and the actions of the previous federal government under Scott Morrison created the circumstances in which home building companies are going broke week after week, leaving their customers and their tradies in the lurch. So politicians keep tinkering with the housing market and they invariably make matters worse. And as long as that remains the case, there won't be any improvement in these critical issues anytime soon. Politicians have caused the worst problems afflicting the housing industry, and they're unlikely to be the source of improvements or solutions.